Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Game, Develop, Repeat, the podcast where we talk about a game I love, what makes it special, and what we, as game developers, can learn from it. I'm your host, Chris, and in today's episode, we will be discussing Helldivers 2. Now, for anybody in the future, I need to provide some context, and for anybody new to the show, I need to frame the conversation a bit. Let me start by saying this. I'm not here to pick sides in this conversation. I'm not here to provide any kind of vindication. I think at the moment, if you're searching Helldivers 2, you're probably looking for news or looking for some sort of a dunking on somebody, a little bit of that entertainment value that you can get from somebody just getting dunked on, or like an aggressive defense of the community, of your community, like really helping defend your own group, right? I understand that fully. I have no problem with that. That just happens to not be what we're doing here. What we're doing here is attempting to learn as much as we possibly can from exploring some ideas around Helldivers 2, around what has gone on with this particular incident. Because, and this will be some context for people listening from the future, this has been one of the most precipitous drops I've ever seen in a game's review score over the course of 2 days. It has been a profound and impressive drop in review score. It's been a lot. And I feel like I have some thoughts on what made this game particularly vulnerable to that. Now, I'm not 100% confident that I'm accurate with that, but I want to explore these theories some, because I'm looking at the Steam page right now, and this game has recent reviews overwhelmingly negative. This is reviews from the past 30 days, and keep in mind, this controversy has been active for about 3 days since Friday. Today is Sunday. 13% of the last 252,940 user reviews, 13% are positive. All the rest are negative. The review score for all reviews has dropped to a 44% positive rating, mixed. Now, that is not good. That is a very bad review score on Steam, despite the fact that people love this game. I want to dig into that. I want to explore that some. And I want to talk about the unique marketing style that this game used that I've been obsessed with. And I haven't known how to talk about it until this happened. And then I went, oh, this is the perfect time to talk about how Helldivers 2 uses like satirical propaganda to create kind of real propaganda for their game. It's this fascinating marketing strategy thing that's like built into the design of the game and the aesthetic, and it's so cool. It's their greatest strength, and I think it may be their greatest weakness. So let's get into that conversation. The propaganda machine behind this game is fantastic. There is something about the lore of this game and the way that it invites you to interact with it that is very unique. There's something about the specific setting and the way that they present their extremely satirical, super hyper patriotic, managed democratic propaganda is enticing. It is marvelous, and it makes you want to interact with it. It makes you go, yeah, you know what? I do need to fight for managed democracy. It's so over the top. It's so absurd. And it's got such a Starship Troopers vibe. And it invites you not just to play the game, but to be part of something. And I think a lot of the more creative players, or a lot of people, will go onto Reddit or onto TikTok and engage in the propaganda machine. They'll be like, well, I don't want to play the game that much, but I do want to cover the war effort, right? It's got the kind of lore that pulls you in and goes, I want to kind of create something in this universe. This is pretty cool. And so people can go on TikTok or whatever your platform of choice is and say, hey, here's an update on the war effort, because there is a map in the game. There is a war effort. You are trying to clear areas. You're trying to protect people. You're trying to do this whole thing. There's a deeper meaning. And there's goals that get set for you by the game master that's going on. So people can get in here and go, okay, we need to organize so that we can clear this area. We've been fighting for this for too long. We need to do a big rush and take it over so that we can move on to this objective. Or, oh, we need to abandon this place so that we can take this place, or what have you. And you got other people going in there that are like, abandon this place. What are you? An automaton? Are you, is this a psyop by the enemy? Are you trying to trick us? I don't believe you. Report to your nearest democracy officer, right? People get to role play. People get to have fun. People get to really dig into this world and feel like they belong in it. And so you get people who are playing these specific roles now, right? You've got people who are going, okay, everybody work on this. Everybody work towards this goal. And other people are saying, kind of being contradictory and fighting these particular goals and opinions. And you've got specific laid out gameplay goals of, do we want this reward or this reward? Do we want to conquer this territory or this territory? You've got organization. You've got people reporting on it. You've got a whole network, this whole communication network built around this game because the lore begs you to do it. I'm not sure why, but it does. And the game company is asking you to do it too. They're inviting you to be a part of this whole thing. They're saying, hey, come on in, have fun, play this game with us. It's not just a game where you're shooting stuff. It's a game where you are part of a bigger thing. And yes, it's over the top and it's a little bit insane and you're going to die hundreds of times, but that's part of it. You're there to die because you need to make this giant sacrifice to protect managed democracy. That's good stuff. That's really good stuff. That's powerful, right? It gives you this feeling of like, I'm fighting for something greater than myself, even though it's a parody, right? You have this dual feeling of like, this is hilarious satire and it's great. And I'm going to, like, you can lean into it. You can play the character and then you can like come out of it and be like, man, that's such a fun satire, right? Marvelous. Absolutely marvelous. Now you've got this interesting problem starting though. Your community has a lot of power in this. Some people view this as a problem. Actually, I say problem. It's just a potential source of problems, right? So your community is helping drive your marketing, which is huge. That's hugely beneficial. Your community is also constantly communicating with each other, which is also great, right? You want those bonds. They were actively encouraging people to, as far as I can tell, based on some decisions that they're making, they're actively encouraging people to communicate and decide what goal they want to achieve, right? What they want to accomplish. So you've got this subreddit that is really popping. You've got this subreddit where everybody's very, very engaged. And you've got like you've just got places where people are communicating a lot. But now the issue appears, which is if you've got this really strong sense of community, and if you've got these people who are leading the community to some extent, and if you've got these people who are playing specific roles, then if you make yourself the enemy, then now you just have, you kind of have a union. You effectively have a union that is saying you have done something we do not want, and we are stopping work until you go back how it was supposed to be. And they're like, we're not recruiting people. In fact, we're telling people to refund. In fact, we're telling people to give a negative review and refund. And you know what? We know how to communicate really effectively with each other. So now everybody knows, and everybody's taking action really, really quickly. And then you get this massive, precipitous drop that I suspect is not people saying we hate this game and will never come back. I suspect, and you know what, it's just worth discovering whether or not I'm right. I suspect that this is people saying, hey, we're voting against this policy, and when you reverse it, you'll be fine, right? We're voting against this policy. Yeah, this is the only way we have power. You got to reverse this policy. Otherwise, we're out of here, right? That's what it looks like to me. It just looks like an extremely active community going, no way, dude. Absolutely not. I don't think they're ditching this game. Unless the game doesn't, unless the developers and publisher, unless they're unable to reverse this decision for some reason, I think they'll come right back around. And then I look forward to one thing, which is I look forward to seeing how they integrate this to the lore and if they choose to integrate this to the lore, because I've already seen a couple jokes about it on the subreddit. I've been exploring this concept a bit. I've already seen a couple jokes where people are like, "Oh, this is the automatons have taken over," or like a joke review on Steam that's like, "This is an automaton operation," or whatever. They could totally roll this into the game's lore if they wanted to, right? There's an angle for that. Now they'll know better than I will what's good game design here, what fits for their long-term plans and all this stuff, but boy, you could roll this into like a whole automaton thing, have like a whole swell of the automaton forces. It would make sense because everybody stopped fighting for however long. There could be some weird corruption thing. There are so many angles, dude. There's so much. And that could be really cool. And what I hope happens is that this decision gets reversed. The community comes together and goes, okay, great, awesome, thank you for listening. Here's your path to redemption. And then the game goes, hey, path to redemption, we'll take that. And the developers make some awesome stuff that really pulls people in. That would be beautiful. And all they got to do for that is figure out their way through this, whatever it is going on behind the scenes that is preventing them from reversing the PlayStation Network thing, which, for the record, I don't have the mindset of this is just like a pure evil money grab thing. I really do think that it's a failure of communication. I think that it is, just based on what I've looked at, it's like, I think the largest factor, at least I should say it that way, I think the largest factor in this is a failure of communication and a little bit of a mishap on some early decisions on the launch of the game when they were probably in a panic and focused on other factors. But we'll get into that alongside a bit of a discussion about the game design that happens outside of the game itself. So I want to quote something from an interview I listened to recently about game design. I want to quote a man named Jonathan Rogers, who is a designer for Path of Exile. I think he worked on Path of Exile, and now I believe he's lead designer for Path of Exile 2. I may have his title incorrect. I may not be getting the exact right title. In fact, I'm probably not. But his name is Jonathan Rogers, and I listened to this like 2-ish hour interview with him, being interviewed by Josh Stripe Hayes, who you may or may not know, content creator on YouTube. He also has a Twitch stream, and he does a lot of content around MMOs and like really bad MMOs, and he'll do content around old games and how well they hold up, that sort of thing. You're probably familiar. I'm probably over-explaining who he is. But he was interviewing this developer, and he asked him for lessons that are like very distinctive lessons that you learn from being in it. He was like, what's something that you learn from doing development? What is something that you only learn from somebody who's like already been in it, already worked on it, or from experience, right? And he gave kind of an interesting answer. He was like, well, I'm not sure if this is exactly an answer to that question, but it seems very relevant, so I'll answer with this. And he opens with, everything is game design. Everything is game design, right? And he's like, let me give you an example. And he starts going in on how if your advertising campaign makes players very hyped for the game, that's affecting their mindset going into the game, and that's part of the game design. If you've got this whole community thing going on, that's part of the game design. Your advertisements are game design. Your little story booklets that you have alongside the game are part of the game design. The cover art is part of the game design. Everything affects the way that the player experiences the game. Honestly, whether or not somebody's in the room with you is part of your experience in the game, right? So like your speakers, your everything. Everything, there's so many individual factors that you can't deal with, right? And he was kind of saying, like, if I'm in the room with somebody, I can make sure that they have a good experience because I can kind of direct them in a way that makes sure that they experience the design as intended. But anyway, I'm getting a little bit off track because I just think it's such a fascinating point and it's easy for me to ramble on it. How it relates to Helldivers 2 is that everything that is happening right now is part of the game design. Everything that happened prior is part of the game design. And it's just a question of how do you make sure that this turns into a positive experience for the community. And I think that the designers have a good feel for that sort of thing. It seems that way to me. It seems like they understand this concept that everything outside of the game is part of the game. Josh Strife Hayes called this, I think, phenomenology, like every phenomenon surrounding it. I think that might be the word. So if you want to look deeper into this sort of concept, I think that's what it's called in acting or in like theater. So if you want to dig deep, that's, I think, the word to search, phenomenology. This is huge for this game. I do not think that I would enjoy Helldivers 2 as much as I do if it weren't for the stupid, crazy trailers and propaganda and the people and all of this stuff. And that's why this is a little bit of a scary moment for the Helldivers community, because they don't know if they're going to come back from this, you know? This is such a major part of this game, is how is this community interacting with it? I think there are ways to make sure that it has the best possible chance of coming back. I already discussed that a little bit. But this is a fascinating lesson in game design. How many games have you played where one little thing changes and it's just a little nuisance for you and you go, I'm done with this. I'm fed up. I'm done. I don't want to play this anymore. I've had so many things where it's like, oh, I'm going to play this game, right? This seems like a good game. And then I find out I have to make a new account for it. And I go, oh, never mind. Not going to play this game. I don't like doing that. I'm such an old man about that stuff. If somebody's like, oh, make a new account, I'm like, no, I'm just not playing your game. I don't care how good your game is. I'm not playing it. I'm tired of making accounts. I'm tired of writing down passwords. I'm tired of changing passwords. I'm tired of giving out my email. I'm not doing it. If I can't just play it, oh, sorry, I just bumped the mic really hard. I hope it wasn't too loud. If I can't just play it, it ruins a chunk of the experience for me. Unless it's absolutely necessary. I understand it in some circumstances, right? But man, it really pulls me away from it, man. And that's part of this game design concept. And I think that it's really important that as designers, we look at that and we say, how do we want to start the immersion on this game? Does this player need to log into something? What is the first thing you see? Does it set you up to play this game? What does the trailer look like? Does the trailer give you some kind of an impression of story? How are you building this game up? Where are you advertising it? What kind of an advertisement are you running? Are you doing this like old school 90s thing where you're like really aggressive with it? Are you just doing like little quick segments? Like, are you giving it long gameplay tutorials for people who are like really into that particular, like some particular genre, like a Civilization style thing, like a 4X strategy game? How do you market for a 4X game? And how much background and lore do you provide within your marketing materials or within whatever other context you're creating that makes somebody excited to play your game? Look at old game cover art, right? Look at these games that just have like a little one pixel moves forward, attacks other pixel, right? And then you look at the cover art for it, and then you're like, oh, now I know what I'm playing as. Now I'm awesome. Now I'm the coolest, and I'm going to go save the princess or whatever. And it's just like 4 pixels moving around on a screen or like. There's so much you can do by creating a story in the player's mind. Think about the things you visualize when you read a book, all right? The pre-release marketing is doing that kind of a thing. That's part of the game. And I recommend this segment of this interview at the very least. I will link it. In the description for this show. It is Jonathan Rogers from the Josh Strife Hayes interview about PoE 2. He talks about, what is this next part? I got to get back to it. He's talking about recognizing as a developer that when you're complaining about marketing being really hard, you're complaining about part of the game. I think he makes some vague mention of this, and I'm probably mangling it, and this is why I recommend you watch the interview. But he mentions that like whenever somebody's like, oh man, marketing is such a terrible, it's just that I'm not marketing well. It's like, well, if you reframe that as part of the game, if you start to understand that, then it can be a fun, exciting thing that you're working on, right? It's like, this is how I'm introducing people to this world. This is how I'm showing people what kind of a thing they're getting into. This is how I'm getting them excited about this world, and it affects their experience in this world. And I think this is something I need to work on personally, because I downplay my games big time. I'm always like, I'm working on, whatever, it's not great. Right? I'm happy with Soot. I'm proud of that game. And I think I'm a little too conscious of this effect, where I go, oh, well, I don't want to set high expectations. It's just a chill game. I just made a chill game, and I just want people to experience this as a chill game. And that's true. I made a cute game. It's nice. It's cute. I like it. It's not something crazy. It's cute. I like it. But that's what I'm talking about. For my next, in the future, I want to be able to look at it and go, here is what I want my marketing to be that sets the game up to be a particular thing. If you want to see what marketing I should have gone with, so watch the trailer, because the trailer gives this specific vibe. It's like this. Actually, the trailer sets this up as so much more of a game than it is in a way. The trailer creates this adventure that the character is going on, right? It creates this feeling of you're trying to save Soot. You're trying to get him out of this fireplace thing. It's got a whole journey to it. And then the game itself is just a platformer with some lava and some ice things and some little fire guys that you move around. But there's no narrative unless you've watched the trailer. And then if you watch the trailer, there is a narrative. And now there's a reason why you would want to play the game. This is cool. This is so cool. And it's so easy to ignore. And Helldivers 2 is one of the most interesting examples of this, because it's the stuff that is happening outside of the game, the stuff that's going on outside of the game is incredible. It's such a huge part of the gameplay. And the way that people are reacting just shows how invested they are in all of this, how much they care about this. I've only got 16 hours in the game, and I still care deeply about this because the game is so cool. Right? It's got such an interesting vibe. It's got such a remarkable aesthetic, because I always loved Starship Troopers. And it's got good nostalgia hit for that for me, right? Now, the other huge lesson that I want to take away from this, and the other thing I want to learn from this that I don't really know exactly what to learn from it, is about communication. I don't know exactly what the lesson is, but I know that it's something about communication, because communication is tricky. Communication can be really hard. Anybody who's been in a relationship for a long time knows that you say one thing, the other person might not fully understand your meaning, and then you have to clarify, and then your clarification might mess things up. How many times have you had a conversation with somebody in your life where you're trying to say something with good intentions, but it just keeps coming out wrong, and you're not communicating the idea, the underlying idea, right? And it's just not meshing. That's a thing. And we forget that a company is trying to communicate something very clearly to so many people. If you can't communicate effectively about what you want for dinner tonight with your friends, family, or significant other, how is a company going to communicate effectively with you about why they require this login thing, right? Yeah, that's hard to do. And I think, in this particular instance, we can look at it and go, okay, they thought they were communicating effectively. Let's just assume good intention for a moment, if you don't mind. They thought they were communicating effectively from the get-go, right? They thought, hey, we've told everybody that this is a thing. We've told everybody that you're going to have this login. And then somebody didn't communicate to the Arrowhead team that, hey, this only works in certain countries. And then maybe somebody didn't communicate to Sony, hey, we're selling in every country. I kind of doubt that, but it probably slipped through the cracks somewhere. I don't know. Let's just assume good intentions, like I was saying. And then somebody didn't communicate to the players, you're going to have this PlayStation Network thing. So down the line, everybody's making assumptions that other people understand stuff. Everybody's assuming the players understand that they need this login because they saw a screen that said they need the login. And they're like, how can you not understand that? It said it. And the player's like, I see screens on games all the time that I click next on and I don't care about. I don't care how big the screen is, whatever. It let me play, so clearly I don't need the login. Right? People are like, oh, there's this warning on the Steam page. Yeah, and I didn't look at that. Right? There's that angle. There's all this miscommunication. And I think that they made a genuine effort to communicate this stuff to the players, and it was not sufficient because most communication in games is through action. It is through letting you know you can and can't do something because you are either able or unable to do it. So if you're able to do the thing, no gamer goes, "Oh, I'm in a grace period." That's not what we do. Even if there's a message that says you are in a grace period, this will be canceled, whatever, a lot of people are going to miss it, you know? A lot of people are going to miss that because we go in and we're trying to play and we're looking at our actions and what the results of our actions are, and that's how we learn the rules a lot of the time. So you go in and it lets you play and you go, "Okay, well, I'm allowed to play. Cool. I'm good. It's whatever. We're good." So I don't know how you could solve that communication problem. I'm sure there's probably a way, but it does emphasize that you need to understand the way in which people are hearing what you're saying, not just the way you're saying it, right? You need to make sure that there's comprehension, like actual comprehension of what you're saying if it's something really important. And this was something really important. It doesn't seem like it was, but to a lot of people it was, because in some places now they can't even play the game, right? So it's really important to communicate effectively with this. And if you communicate ineffectively, it can make something end up looking like a scam. And that, it sounds harsh because it's a harsh feeling, right? It's not that it is a scam. It may not be. It may be. Some people are going to have different opinions. Some people are going to look at this whole thing and be like, "Oh, it's just a scam. Sony just wants this. Sony just wants that." Some people are going to look at it and they're going to go, "Oh, it's just a miscommunication." Some people are going to look at it and they're going to go, "Oh, players are just acting up. It's no problem," right? Everybody's going to have their own angle. But if you do not communicate effectively, there is a chance, pretty decent chance, that people are going to think they're getting scammed because they're going to go, "That's not what you told me." Right? And I remember experiencing this at a very young age where I didn't communicate something effectively and somebody else thought I was lying to them when they just didn't understand what I said. And maybe I didn't say it effectively. Maybe they didn't hear me. Whatever the case is, it created confusion. And I think we probably all had this instance, right? Where like you say something and somebody doesn't understand and they're like, "What do you mean I told you?" And they're like, "No, you didn't. You said this." And like, "No, those are not the words I said. I said these words." And they're like, "I understood you to mean this." That whole thing, right? That's rough. That's hard to deal with. That's hard to do. That's hard to navigate. But it's one of the things that we've got to do. And I think it's really important that we just keep an eye on that whenever it's something especially interesting, or excuse me, especially important, so that we don't accidentally mislead somebody. And sometimes you're going to accidentally mislead people. This is the other thing. Sometimes you say something, somebody misunderstands it, and you're like, "Oh, well, they're just going to have to learn because like I cannot find a way to effectively communicate this." If you accidentally mislead somebody, you got to give them a way back out, you know, if you can. If you accidentally mislead them, you got to go, "Okay, I understand that we didn't understand each other. And as a result, here's what I'm willing to do because this was a miscommunication." This is why contracts and law and stuff are so specific, because a lot of the time there's no backing out because oopsie, right? There's no, man, how many times in elementary school was somebody like no take backsies, all that stuff? It's that kind of a vibe, right? It's that kind of an issue where you're like, we just weren't on the same page. So I think as a developer, it's really, really important to make sure that things are communicated clearly. And I mean this in terms of game design. I'm not talking about this in terms of dealing with your community. I'm talking, if you teach a player that you can jump this high, then you can jump that high, unless you clearly communicate otherwise, right? If you teach a player that you have variable control over this particular thing, then you have that control, unless there's a very clear reason why you don't. That is like fundamental. One of the worst things in a game is for things to be really, really confusingly communicated, for you to have no idea what the heck somebody means. Like, you're like, "How am I supposed to play this? I don't understand at all." That doesn't work. Clear communication is not just about community management. It is absolutely about game design. And also, community management is part of game design. Last note that I want to make for this chunk of the podcast, because I'm going so long today, unexpectedly. be aware of who has control over what. This is the most direct critique that I will make of this entire thing. It's clear that Sony made this decision. From what I've heard so far, it's clear that Sony said, we're doing this. And then the team that developed the game was like, oh God, this is not going well. And we would reverse this decision if we could, but our hands are tied. And so here we are. And they're just stuck. As far as I can tell, they're just stuck. They're just like, oh, well, we're in this corner. And crap, what do we do about it? And that's not, just for the record, that's not to say that this team doesn't have some amount of fault for whatever happened. I don't know who makes what decisions and how much control they have over what. I'm not going to pretend to. But if you're making decisions, make sure that you are able to navigate your way in and out of those decisions, right? Don't back yourself into a corner where somebody else has control of the door behind you, and now you're locked into this room with an angry group of people banging on the door saying, please let me out. And then the people who are on the other side of the door are like, hold on, it's Sunday, and we'll talk about this on Monday, while your review score just keeps tanking, right? Because that's probably how that feels. That's my best guess. I am making some assumptions here, but I think it's probably pretty important to know what you have control over so that you don't end up locked in a room with a bunch of people who you can't negotiate with, right? Because you literally don't have the power to negotiate. That's not the best metaphor. The locked in the room thing doesn't like paint the right picture, but I hope you understand what I'm getting at with that. Now, see, there it is with the communication again. Poor communication. I'm going to keep working on that, actually. That's one of the reasons I do the podcast, so I can continue learning to express my ideas in a clear way. So, I think that's enough discussion about Helldivers 2 itself. I think that kind of covers my thoughts. Let's wrap this thing up. Let's get through the last segment real quick. We'll just do a speed run here. I have two questions for you. The first one is, how would you find space to think in the midst of a massive controversy? So let's imagine that you are the CEO of Arrowhead Game Studios, right? You're the man behind Helldivers 2. How are you finding space to think to make sure that the next step you take is the right step? How are you clearing your mind so that you're not just working from a place of like fear and chaos and panic? For me, I feel like that's going to be spending time in the wilderness alone, without music, without anything, just spending time in the woods, walking around, or weightlifting. I love weightlifting. That's a big one for me. Some kind of exercise, some kind of movement, or calling friends and talking to friends. That can be pretty big, although that sometimes gets me more riled up. So it's going to depend on the specific situation, because I might just like, it depends. I think I would probably talk to people first and then maybe get out in the woods, because we do need to think about this. We need to have a plan before things go wrong. Because if you make a really wildly successful game, something's going to go wrong. You're at least going to get some negative reviews. Something's going to hurt your feelings, right? And you need to know how you're going to deal with that. That's a good thing to plan in advance, I think. Next question. How do you find space to create things in the chaos of life? For me, I find one of the things that gets me is I have too many thoughts. So then when I do have time to create things, when I do have space to create things, I don't create things because I'm overwhelmed. I have too many thoughts. So one of the big things that helps me with this, or I feel tired, one of the things that helps me with this is actually listening to music while I do chores. If I'm doing chores and I'm not listening to music, my mind will kind of go through this thing where it can overwhelm me sometimes. If I'm listening to music in the background, chores will feel kind of fun. Like best case, not listening to music, I finish chores and I go, I'm done with all my chores, so I don't need to do any more work today, so I can't create anything. I'm done. I'm just going to relax. If I'm listening to music, worst case is kind of like, all right, I got my chores done. Cool. What's next? You know? Like, it helps me a lot. It helps my energy level. Something about having music on in the background while I'm like cooking or doing whatever it is, or cooking is particularly draining for me because I don't feel good at it, right? And it's like pseudo creative, and it's kind of weird for me. So if I'm cooking and I listen to music in the background, it helps a lot. It really helps me go, oh yeah, this is nice, this is good, and then we're fine. So what helps you get space to create things? Is it just space away from people? What is it that makes you go, I can't make anything today because I already did this thing, right? And then do you just need a minute to recover, right? When you finish at work, do you go, well, I already worked today, so I need to relax. And then you turn on something that keeps your brain active. Do you just need 20 minutes, 10 minutes? What do you need to be able to still create throughout the day? That's always an interesting one to me. That's my questions. I said I was going to speed run it. Apparently I did not. I've got a tip for myself too. I would say acknowledge or ignore how little control you have, then make things anyway. Does that make sense? I just feel like that's relevant to today's episode. Like, it's so clear to me that we just don't have that much control over everything. So I would say acknowledge or ignore how much control you have, and then keep doing stuff anyway. I will have a link for you to the to the interview that I referenced with Josh Strife-Hayes and Jonathan Rogers. That'll be in the description for this episode. There are a bunch of other links too. There's a link to the Discord if you want to join the community. There's a link to the Twitch stream. I stream every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 2 to 7 Eastern time. First 3 hours are game dev. Last 2 hours are playing a game. That's about everything I've got for you. Oh, actually, this week I am going to be doing a Thursday stream. I haven't figured out the exact time yet, but keep an eye out. Maybe hit follow, see what time I go live. But I am going to do a Thursday stream for a game release that I'm keeping an eye on. There's not a guarantee, but there's a very, very high chance of that happening. So keep an eye out. Almost 100%, but not a guarantee yet. And that's on twitch.tv/anxiousbuddhagames. There's a bunch of links below, Discord, Ko-Fi, whatever. You get the idea. That is everything for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you are having an excellent week. Well, it's just started, but I hope you have an excellent week. And I will see you in the next one. Until then, get out there, make some stuff, and have fun with it. Bye-bye.